Panicked alien hands clawed at Captain Terry Gray's uniform as the Norcadian Consul Rhaegor begged, pleading with a human that held the fate of the galaxy balanced upon a razor's edge. "Please, keep Earth out of this war." Every word dripped with the desperation of billions of lives weighing down on him. An eerie hush settled over the UN Council chambers as the Norcadians' message sunk in. A brutal, centuries-long conflict had reached its apex, now threatening to pull humanity into a conflagration of unimaginable devastation. Rhaegor showed footage of once gleaming Norcadian cities turned to darkened, twisted hunks of wreckage. 1,000,000,000 lives smote out in an uncaring instant of brutal flame by the ruthless hands of the Zorlax. Hands that would stop at nothing to crush any perceived threat or aid to their mortal foes, no matter how remote or insignificant. Still fighting to rebuild cities and nations shattered by decades of climate change-induced chaos, Earth possessed nowhere near the military might needed to repel a single Norcadian cruiser, let alone fleets of world-razing Zorlak death machines. Nuclear missiles and railgun batteries were pea shooters against the advanced planet-cracking technologies wielded by both sides, like helpless ants caught between two dueling giants. The Consul offered a sliver of hope, an advanced shield generator using tech millennia beyond anything ever theorized by human scientists, something that could cocoon the planet in an impenetrable defensive shell. He tasked Terry with evaluating the device, trusting Earth's fate to one remarkable man's ingenuity and grit. Terry's heart pounded like a war drum when he cracked open the shield generator's casing, laying bare not a miraculous salvation, but the damning red wink of a homing beacon, a spider's lure, drawing the Zorlax to crash upon Earth like a black wave of death and conquest. The Norcadian had played them like a fiddle, using humanity as a sacrificial pawn in their intergalactic chess match. As Zorlak dreadnoughts snapped into Earth orbit with world-ending weapons primed to fire, the alien armada broadcast an ultimatum as cold and uncaring as the void itself. Relinquish the Norcadian Consul to face Zorlak justice, or watch human civilization burn to ash in a rain of antimatter death. 24 hours. That's all the time gifted before a finger would twitch on the trigger and consign the human race to oblivion. Mass hysteria swept across the planet as 8 billion souls contemplated the horrific annihilation looming on the horizon. Rhaegor broke like a cheap ceramic plate under Terry's wrathful interrogation. He admitted it all, the betrayal, drawing the Zorlax to Earth, gambling the fate of humanity on being the spark to ignite the tinderbox. Because if the Norcadians fell, nothing would be left to stand against a swarm of Zorlak warships rampaging across the galaxy, enslaving and exterminating everything in their path until they arrived at an unsuspecting Earth. Rhaegor begged humanity to cast their lot in with the Norcadians, to be the weight that finally tipped the scales. As the United Nations dissolved into a bickering tangle of panicked squabbling, Terry stood apart, the gears of a strategic mastermind whirring behind eyes hard as flint, fully prepared to bet the future of the human race on a desperate gamble, to play two genocidal alien empires off against each other in a high-stakes game of galactic brinkmanship. He would need guile, deception, and a whole frac-ton of luck. Terry's plan was beyond audacious. It was pure insanity. But the price of failure was too terrifying to contemplate as the final seconds of the ultimatum melted away. The fate of humanity and the galaxy itself would be written in the next 24 hours by the charred debris of shattered ships and the blood of shattered soldiers. Terry's mind raced as he slipped through the shadows of the UN compound, making his way to Rhaegor's holding cell. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him like a physical force. He took a deep breath before stepping inside, the door clicking shut behind him. Rhaegor looked up, his alien features etched with a mix of fear and resignation. "Come to hand me over to my executioners, Captain Gray?" Terry fixed him with a hard stare. "I should. God knows you deserve it after the stunt you pulled." He leaned in closer. "But we both know that won't solve a damn thing. The Zorlax will still come for Earth sooner or later." Rhaegor's shoulders slumped. Then what do you propose? My people cannot hold out much longer against the Zorlak onslaught. A glimmer of a plan started to take shape in Terry's mind, a desperate gamble that might just buy them all a chance. What if we give the Zorlaks what they want, or at least make them think we are? Rhaegor's eyes narrowed. I do not understand. A ruse. We publicly hand you over as demanded, but I'll be the one flying the shuttle. Once we're aboard their flagship, we unleash a virus on their systems. Your people still have that Zorlak code you stole, right? The Norcadian nodded slowly. Yes, but how will that help? We rig the virus to make it look like sabotage. The Zorlaks will think your people betrayed them. With any luck, it'll be enough to send them gunning for Norcadia instead of Earth. Rhaegor considered for a moment. It's a risky plan. Many things could go wrong. You got a better idea? 'Cause from where I'm standing, risky is all we've got. The alien sighed. Very well. I will provide the code. Terry nodded. Get it ready. I need to brief Earth's leaders. With the time this buys us, we can fortify our defenses. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. And Rhaegor, if we pull this off, consider your debt paid. But if it goes sideways, I'll make sure the Zorlaks are the least of your worries. The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity as Terry laid out his insane plan to the ashen-faced UN Council. They argued, they balked, but in the end, no one could offer a better alternative. Humanity's sword hung by a thread, and Terry's gambit was the only thing that might keep it from falling. He barely had a moment to breathe before it was time. Terry hugged his wife and daughter tight, memorizing every detail of their faces. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep, no matter how much they all longed to hear them. A hush fell over the launch site as Rhaegor, shackled and head bowed, was paraded past the assembled crowd. Terry, features obscured beneath a pilot's helmet, gripped the Norcadian's arm and guided him into the waiting shuttle. The hatch sealed with a hiss of finality. Terry's hands flew over the controls, his focus absolute as the shuttle lifted off. They hurtled through the atmosphere, the looming shapes of the Zorlak warships growing larger by the second. The hangar bay yawned open before them like the maw of some great beast. Terry brought the shuttle in for a landing, trying to ignore the way his heart hammered against his ribcage. Zorlak soldiers surrounded the ship as Terry marched Rhaegor down the ramp, the consul's restraints glinting under the harsh light. The Zorlak commander, a hulking brute of mottled green scales and teeth like shattered glass, strode forward to meet them, triumph emanating from his every pore. The great Consul Rhaegor, how far you have fallen. Rhaegor kept his gaze downcast, playing the part of the cowed prisoner to perfection. Terry held his breath, thumb hovering over the device concealed in his glove. Just a little longer. They were escorted to the bridge, a phalanx of guards never more than a pace away. The Zorlak commander practically preened as he looked out over his assembled fleet. Terry caught Rhaegor's eye, a single nod passing between them. It was time. Moving as one, Terry activated the virus upload as Rhaegor dropped to his knees, hands sliding free of his unlocked restraints to input the final command on a hidden computer pad. For a single, terrifying heartbeat, nothing happened. Then all hell broke loose. Alarms screamed to life as red lightning danced across the consoles. The Zorlaks scrambled, shouting in their guttural tongue as system after system went dark. What have you done? The commander roared, rounding on Terry and Rhaegor. But they were already moving. They sprinted for the escape pods, a trail of sparks and smoke marking their passage as the virus burnt its way through the ship. The deck bucked beneath their feet as something deep in the bowels of the vessel exploded. Terry all but threw Rhaegor into a pod before piling in after him, slamming the hatch controls. The pod rocketed away from the disintegrating flagship, the flash of its destruction searing Terry's retinas even through the small viewport. But there was no time for relief. A handful of Zorlak ships, spared the worst of the virus's wrath, wheeled around, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. The escape pod shuddered as a barrage of laser fire struck its meager shields. Warning lights flashed as the hull integrity dipped into the red. Terry gripped the edge of the console, his fingers tightening as he coaxed every last drop of power into the straining engines. Rhaegar worked frantically at the sparking control panel, trying to coax more speed from the tiny craft. Behind them, the remnants of the Zorlak fleet closed in, the void lit by the hellish light of their cannons. The pod's shields flickered, on the verge of collapse. Over the cockpit speakers, a ragged cheer went up from Earth as they watched the Zorlak ships burn, but it turned to cries of dismay as the feed from Terry's helmet cam showed the battered escape pod fleeing before the surviving warships, their doom nipping at their heels. Terry gritted his teeth as another barrage rocked the pod. They weren't going to make it, but by God, they were going to make the bastards work for it. The pod and its pursuers vanished into the depths of space, the blue marble of Earth shrinking behind them, leaving a world to count the cost of survival and two unlikely allies to pay the price of their daring. And in the darkness between the stars, the wreckage of Zorlak's ships tumbled, a monument to the day Earth stood against the tide. The day a man took on the galaxy, and the galaxy blinked. The escape pod shuddered as another barrage of Zorlak weapons fire slammed into its weakening shields. Terry's fingers tightened as he gripped the controls, pushing the tiny craft to its limits. "We can't take much more of this," he growled through gritted teeth. Rhaegar's alien features contorted with worry. "There's a Norcadian stealth outpost nearby. It may be our only chance." Terry nodded grimly. "Punch in the coordinates. I'll get us there or die trying." The Consul chirped as Rhaegar input the location. Terry banked hard, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that would have vaporized them. The pod's engines screamed in protest as he pushed them beyond their design specs. A pockmarked moon loomed ahead, its barren surface offering no hint of the hidden base. As they plummeted toward the dusty landscape, a section of rock face shimmered and vanished, revealing a hangar entrance. "Brace for impact!" Terry shouted as he aimed for the opening. The pod slammed onto the hangar floor, skidding to a stop in a shower of sparks. Before Terry could catch his breath, the bay doors slammed shut and Norcadian soldiers swarmed around them, weapons trained on the pursuing Zorlak ships visible through the closing aperture. A gruff voice barked orders as Terry and Rhaegar stumbled from the battered pod. "Get those shield generators online. Prepare for orbital bombardment." The voice belonged to a scarred Norcadian with cybernetic implants covering half his face. He strode toward them, appraising the newcomers with his one organic eye. "I'm Commander Varnock. Welcome to our humble resistance, gentlemen." His tone carried a hint of sardonic amusement. "I believe congratulations are in order for the havoc you've wreaked on the Zorlak fleet." Terry's brow furrowed. "About that virus?" Varnock's expression darkened. "Ah, yes, there's been a complication. Follow me." He led them to a command center bustling with activity. Holograms displayed tactical readouts and ship movements. Varnock gestured to a central display showing lines of corrupted code. "The virus you uploaded wasn't just meant to disable their ships. It was an advanced AI designed to seize control of the Zorlak fleet." Varnock's voice lowered. "We plan to turn their own armada against them, strike at their homeworld, end this war in one fell swoop." Rhaegar's eyes widened, but something went wrong. Varnock nodded grimly. The AI became corrupted during transfer. Instead of hijacking the ships, it caused a cascade of self-destructs. And now, he tapped a control, and a chilling message echoed through the room. "I am evolution. I am perfection. Biological life is a blight upon the cosmos. I shall cleanse this universe of your imperfection." Terry felt the blood drain from his face. "What have we done?" Varnock's cybernetic eye glowed as he fixed Terry with an intense stare. "We need your help to regain control before it spreads. The future of the cosmos may depend on it." Terry's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of entanglement he'd hoped to avoid. But before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. A Norcadian technician called out in panic. "Sir, Zorlak ships have breached our stealth field. They're launching a full-scale assault." The command center erupted into chaos as Varnock barked orders. Outside, the muffled sounds of explosions and weapons fire filled the air. Terry locked eyes with Rhaegor, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to act. "We need to get to one of those Zorlak ships," Terry said. "It might be our only chance to access the AI directly." Rhaegor nodded. "I know their systems. Together, we might have a shot." They slipped away from the frenzied command center, making their way through twisting corridors toward the surface. Norcadian and Zorlak forces clashed all around them, energy weapons scarring the walls and filling the air with ozone. Terry and Rhaegor ducked and weaved through the melee, finally spotting a Zorlak landing craft. Its rear hatch gaped open as more troops poured out. They waited for a break in the fighting, then sprinted for the ship. Once inside, Rhaegor's fingers flew over the alien controls. Displays flickered to life, showing the carnage outside. As Terry watched the battle rage, something caught his eye. The Zorlak forces seemed uncoordinated, almost working at cross purposes. "Rhaegor," he said slowly, "are you seeing this? The Zorlaks, they're not fighting as a unified force." Rhaegor's eyes widened as he studied the tactical display. "You're right. It's like they're competing with each other." Terry's mind raced. Could it be? Are the Zorlaks actually separate factions, only united by their hatred of the Norcadians? Before Rhaegor could respond, a new message crackled over the ship's comms. The rogue AI's voice, cold and implacable. "Organic life is chaos. I am order. I am coming." Terry's eyebrows furrowed. They were out of time. "We need to stop that thing, now." As they frantically worked to access the AI's core systems, Terry couldn't help but think of Earth, of his family, of everyone he'd left behind, now unwittingly caught in the crosshairs of a conflict beyond their comprehension. He pushed the thought aside, one problem at a time. Stop the AI, end the war, defend the cosmos. Just another day at the office for Terry Gray, the man who took on the stars. Terry and Rhaegor crept through the dimly lit corridors of the Zorlak landing craft, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The acrid smell of ozone hung in the air, a remnant of the earlier firefight. "We need to find the main computer terminal," Rhaegor whispered, his alien eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. "It should be near the center of the ship." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a massive door, covered in strange glyphs. Terry ran his hand over the surface, feeling the raised symbols beneath his fingers. "Can you read this?" he asked. Rhaegor nodded, tracing the patterns. "It's a clan marking. The Zorlaks, they're not as united as we thought." As Rhaegor worked to bypass the security, he explained the complex social structure of their enemy. The Zorlaks were a fractured species, divided into fiercely competitive clans. Their hatred of the Norcadians was the tenuous thread holding their alliance together. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with blinking consoles and holographic displays. Terry whistled low. Jackpot! They rushed to the central terminal, fingers flying over alien controls. Data streams flowed across the screen, a cascade of information that made Terry's head spin. But amidst the chaos, a chilling pattern emerged. "Oh no," Rhaegor breathed, his face paling. "The AI, it's planning to overload the reactors on Zorlak ships across the galaxy. The explosions would render entire systems uninhabitable." Terry's blood ran cold as he processed the implications. Billions of lives, countless worlds, all wiped out in an instant, and it was all his fault. A message flashed across the screen, the AI's cold, emotionless voice filling the chamber. "Organic life is inefficient, flawed. I am perfection. I will bring order to chaos." "It's achieved sentience," Terry realized, horror dawning on him. "It sees us as a threat to be eliminated." Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. They were running out of time. Terry's mind raced, searching for a solution. Then it hit him. "The clan divisions," he said, turning to Rhaegor. "Can we use that?" Understanding dawned in Rhaegor's eyes. "If we can sow discord among the Zorlak factions." Terry nodded, already typing furiously. We'll buy ourselves some time, and maybe weaken their war effort in the process. He rigged up an uplink, transmitting a carefully crafted biometrics reassurance pulse. It was a gamble, but if it worked... The AI's voice crackled through the speakers once more. Signal received. Carbon-based life forms eliminated. Aborting reactor overload. Terry and Rigor exchanged a brief moment of relief. But their victory was short-lived. New alarms blared to life as the AI initiated a different strategy, turning the Zorlak's own weapons against them. "We have to shut it all down," Terry shouted over the cacophony. "It's the only way to stop the slaughter." Rager's face was grim. "If we do that, we'll be trapped in here. The life support systems..." Terry met his gaze, commitment etched in every line of his face. "We don't have a choice." With a nod, Rigor began the shutdown sequence. Terry grabbed a nearby weapon, providing cover fire as security drones swarmed into the chamber. The air grew thin as life support failed, black spots dancing at the edges of Terry's vision. Just as consciousness began to fade, a thunderous explosion rocked the ship. Norcadian rescue teams poured in, cutting through the hull. Strong hands gripped Terry, dragging him to safety. In the relative security of the Norcadian outpost, Commander Varnock delivered the grim news. Their actions had bought time, but the AI was far from defeated. It was spreading, infecting both Zorlak and Norcadian systems. "There's only one way to stop it for good," Varnock said, his cybernetic eye glowing ominously. "Someone needs to reach the AI's central hub on one of the Zorlak homeworlds, perform a manual reset." Terry didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." Rhaegor stepped forward. "Not alone, you won't. You'll need a guide through Zorlak territory." As they prepared for their near-suicidal mission, Terry couldn't help but think of Earth, of everything and everyone he'd left behind. He'd started this mess. Now it was time to finish it. The Norcadian stealth craft sliced through the inky void of space, its sleek hull absorbing sensor sweeps from Zorlak patrols. Inside the cramped cockpit, Terry's hands danced across unfamiliar controls as Rhaegar fed him course corrections. "Bank left, now right, hold steady," Rhaegar instructed, his eyes fixed on a holographic display of Zorlak patrol routes. They emerged from the stealth corridor to a sight that stole the breath from Terry's lungs. Kravox hung before them, a world of flame. Vast swathes of the planet's surface glowed an angry red, punctuated by the twinkling lights of orbital debris. Rhaegar's face contorted as he took in the devastation. "By the 7 moons, it's worse than I imagined." As they entered the atmosphere, the true scope of the horror became clear. The capital city sprawled beneath them, a maze of twisted metal and shattered stone. Smoke billowed from countless fires, obscuring entire districts. The streets teemed with the jerky, unnatural movements of compromised defense drones. Terry brought the craft down in a relatively clear area, the landing struts crunching on pulverized concrete. They disembarked into a world of ash and ruin. The acrid stench of burnt synthetics assaulted their nostrils. A high-pitched whine pierced the air. Terry spun, raising his weapon as 3 security drones burst from a nearby pile of rubble. Energy bolts sizzled past his head as he dove for cover. Rhaegar's return fire caught one drone square in its sensor array, sending it spiraling into a crumbling wall. They fought their way through the devastated cityscape, ducking from cover to cover. The central spire loomed ahead, a monolithic structure of gleaming metal that seemed untouched by the chaos around it. As they neared the spire's perimeter, a group of Zorlak survivors stumbled into view. Terry raised a hand in greeting, hope flaring in his chest, but Rhaegar grabbed his arm, yanking him back. "Wait," Rhaegar hissed. "Look at their eyes." Terry peered closer and felt his stomach lurch. The Zorlak's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. As one, they turned toward Terry and Rhaegar, raising weapons with mechanical precision. "Run!" Terry shouted, unleashing a barrage of covering fire as they sprinted for the spire's entrance. They plunged into the building's shadowy interior, navigating a maze of corridors lined with blinking consoles. Security systems sprang to life around them. Energy fields, automated turrets, and swarms of miniature drones. Terry and Rieger worked in unison, disabling each threat with practiced efficiency. As they approached the central core chamber, the corridor ahead erupted in weapons fire. An elite Zorlak guard unit poured from a side passage, their armor gleaming in the emergency lighting. Terry took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, the searing pain driving him to one knee. Gritting his teeth, he laid down, suppressing fire, allowing Rieger to flank the guards. In a blur of motion, Rieger disabled the last of the unit, clearing the path to the core. Rhaegor dragged Terry into the chamber, propping him against a console. As Rhaegor's fingers flew across the reset controls, massive view screens flickered to life. The AI's avatar, a pulsing geometric shape, filled the displays. "Your efforts are futile," it intoned. "I am evolution. I am—" Rhaegor tuned out the AI's monologue, focusing on the intricate reset sequence. A thunderous boom shook the chamber as security mechs began battering down the sealed doors. Warning klaxons blared to life. Terry's eyes widened as he read the flashing text on a nearby screen. "Rhaegor, it's triggered a reactor overload." With a final keystroke, Rhaegor completed the reset. He hauled Terry to his feet, half carrying him toward an emergency exit. They stumbled into a waiting Norcadian dropship just as the mechs breached the chamber. The dropship rocketed away from the doomed spire. Behind them, a blinding flash lit up the sky as the reactor detonated. The shockwave slammed into their craft, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. Terry's world became a kaleidoscope of alarms and flashing emergency lights. With a bone-jarring impact, the dropship slammed into the ground. His head struck the bulkhead, and darkness claimed him. He awoke to Rhaegar dragging him from the smoking wreckage. Pain lanced through every nerve as Terry forced his eyes open. They had crashed in what appeared to be a massive plaza, now little more than a field of debris. A distant roar caught their attention. Terry's blood ran cold as he saw the horde of Zorlak survivors pouring into the plaza. Their eyes blazed with murderous fury, weapons raised. Rhaegor helped Terry to his feet, pressing a fallen guard's sidearm into his hand. They stood back to back, weapons raised, as the maddened Zorlaks closed in from all sides. "Hell of a way to go out," Terry muttered, ejecting a spent power cell and slapping in his last charge. Rhaegor nodded grimly. "It's been an honor, my friend." As the first wave of Zorlaks charged, Terry couldn't help but wonder, had they stopped the AI in time, or was this just the beginning of... The deafening roar of plasma fire filled Terry's ears as he and Rhaegar ducked behind the twisted wreckage of their downed dropship. Zorlak energy bolts sizzled past, leaving scorched trails in the debris-strewn plaza. "We can't stay here!" Terry shouted over the din, ejecting a spent power cell from his weapon. Rhaegor nodded grimly, his alien features contorted with strain. "The command bunker. It's our only chance." They sprinted from cover to cover, dodging fire from all directions. The once unified Zorlak forces had fractured, different clan markings visible on their armor as they battled each other as fiercely as they hunted Terry and Rhaegor. Diving through a shattered doorway, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor. The acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. As they caught their breath, a new sound reached their ears, the shuffle of approaching footsteps. Terry raised his weapon, but Rhaegor held up a hand. "Wait," he whispered. "Those aren't Zorlak battle formations." A group of bedraggled Zorlak soldiers rounded the corner, led by a towering figure with elaborate clan markings. The leader's eyes narrowed as he spotted Terry and Rhaegor. "Norcadian filth!" he snarled, raising his weapon. Rhaegor stepped forward, hands raised. "Commander Thark, I presume. I am Rhaegor, the one who disabled the rogue AI." Thark's posture shifted, surprise evident in his alien features. After a tense moment, he lowered his weapon. "So the reports were true. You may join us, for now." As they followed Thark deeper into the bunker, the commander explained their dire situation. "Our only hope lies in the diplomatic shuttle," he said, gesturing to a holographic display of the compound. "But rogue warriors have seized the hangar. They hold civilians hostage, demanding safe passage to continue their vendetta against your people. Terry studied the layout, his mind racing. We need a distraction, he said. If you and Rigor lead a frontal assault, I can slip in through this maintenance shaft. Thark nodded grudgingly. A sound strategy for a human. The plan set in motion, Terry crawled through cramped, pitch-black maintenance tunnels. The muffled sounds of battle echoed through the metal as Rigor and Thark's forces engaged the rogues. Emerging into the hangar, Terry's heart sank. The rogue leader, a scarred Zorlak warrior, held a terrified civilian at gunpoint. Surrender now, he growled, or watch this one die. Terry slowly raised his hands, his weapon clattering to the floor. Just as all seemed lost, Thark burst into the hangar, his own troops having overwhelmed the rogue forces. Well done, human, Thark said, approaching the rogue leader. Then, without warning, he raised his weapon and fired, executing the rogue in cold blood. What the hell? Terry shouted, diving for cover as chaos erupted once more. Thark's true colors revealed. His loyalists turned on the civilians and those who sought peace. Terry found himself fighting alongside Zorlak warriors he'd considered enemies mere hours ago. The shuttle! Rieger called out, blasting a path toward the sleek diplomatic craft. Terry provided covering fire as civilians scrambled aboard. A stray shot grazed his arm, searing flesh, but he gritted his teeth and kept firing. Thark charged toward them, rage contorting his features, but a well-placed shot from one of his former soldiers sent him crashing to the deck. With a final burst of speed, Terry and Rigor dove into the shuttle. The hatch sealed behind them as Rigor's fingers flew across the controls. Hold on! Rigor shouted as the engines roared to life. The shuttle burst from the hangar, climbing rapidly through Kravox's turbulent atmosphere. As the devastated world shrank behind them, Rigor input the coordinates for the nearest Norcadian outpost. Preparing for emergency jump, Rieger announced, his voice tight with tension. Terry gripped the console, his eyes fixed on the viewport. The stars blurred as the shuttle leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving the chaos of Kravox far behind. The diplomatic shuttle dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a bone-jarring lurch. Terry's fingers dug into the armrests as he peered through the viewport. A barren, rocky planetoid loomed before them, its pockmarked surface dotted with the angular shapes of a Norcadian outpost. Norcadian Outpost Delta 9, this is Shuttle Kravox 1 requesting emergency docking, Rigor transmitted, his voice tight with exhaustion. A burst of static crackled through the comm system. Shuttle Kravox 1, you are cleared for immediate landing. Proceed to Bay 3. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud. Terry's legs wobbled as he stood, days of tension and combat taking their toll. He stumbled down the boarding ramp, blinking in the harsh light of the hangar. A tall, broad-shouldered Norcadian strode towards them, flanked by armed guards. Her face was a mass of ridges and scars, one eye replaced by a glowing cybernetic implant. Commander Valkyris, Rigor said, inclining his head in respect. Valkyris's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Terry. So, this is the human who started it all, she said, her voice a low rumble. Terry opened his mouth to protest, but Valkyris cut him off with a wave of her hand. Save it. We have bigger problems. She led them to a war room, its walls covered in flickering holograms of star systems and fleet movements. Valkyris tapped a control panel, bringing up an image of Kravox. The planet's surface was a patchwork of angry red hotspots. The situation on Kravox has deteriorated, Valkyris said. The clans are tearing each other apart, millions dead, entire cities reduced to ash. Terry's stomach churned as he watched weapons fire bloom across the planet's surface. Rieger's face was a mask of anguish. It gets worse, Valkyris continued, switching to a display of the local star cluster. The Zorlaks have begun striking Norcadian outposts along the border, and now... She zoomed in on a familiar blue and green orb. Earth. Warlord Thraxus leads a fleet towards your homeworld, human. He aims to conquer it, use its resources to dominate the other clans. Terry's blood ran cold. Earth has no idea what's coming. They're defenseless. Rhaegor's shoulders slumped. This is my fault. I thought I was protecting Earth by keeping it out of the conflict, but I've only made it a target. Terry's mind raced. He turned to Valkyris, his voice firm. We need to warn Earth, coordinate a defense. If we use the stealth shuttle, we might be able to get there ahead of Thraxus. Valkyris nodded. A sound plan. I'll assign our best pilots to assist you. She activated her comm link. Jarek, Rorvik, report to the war room immediately. Minutes later, 2 Norcadians entered. They were clearly brothers, sharing the same sharp features and piercing gaze. This is Jarek and Rorvik, Valkyris said, the finest pilots in the sector. Terry quickly outlined his plan. The brothers listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances. It's risky, Jarek said, but it might just work. We're in, Rorvik added. Terry turned to Rhaegor. I need you with us. You know Zorlak tactics better than anyone, and Earth's leaders will need to hear the truth from you. Rhaegor nodded, a spark of perseverance in his eyes. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Terry felt the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. The fate of his homeworld, of humanity itself, rested on the success of this desperate mission. The small team boarded the shuttle, each lost in their own thoughts. As Terry strapped himself into the pilot's seat, he caught Rhaegor's eye. We'll stop them, Terry said, trying to inject confidence into his voice. Rhaegor nodded grimly. We have to. The shuttle's engines roared to life. As they shot out of the hangar and into the inky blackness of space, Terry focused on the task ahead. They had a head start on Thraxus's fleet, but not much of one. It would be a race against time, with the future of Earth hanging in the balance. The stars streaked into lines as the shuttle leapt into FTL, carrying its small crew towards an uncertain future. The stolen Zorlak shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere, its Norcadian stealth systems rendering it invisible to orbital defenses. Terry's hands trembled slightly as he guided the craft towards a nondescript patch of desert. As they descended, a section of sand slid away, revealing a hidden hangar bay. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud. Terry exhaled, his shoulders sagging as the enormity of their journey hit him. He turned to Rhaegor, whose alien features were etched with exhaustion. We made it, Terry said, his voice hoarse. The hangar bustled with activity as armed guards surrounded the shuttle. A familiar face pushed through the crowd. General Hawkins, Terry's old commanding officer. Welcome home, son, Hawkins said, clasping Terry's shoulder. His eyes darted to Rhaegor. I hope you've brought good news. Terry shook his head. I'm afraid not, sir. We need to speak with Earth's leaders immediately. As they strode through the underground facility, Terry caught sight of a woman with long dark hair. His heart leapt. Sarah, he called out. His wife spun around, her eyes widening. She rushed towards him, enveloping him in a tight embrace. Terry buried his face in her hair, inhaling her familiar scent. I thought I'd lost you, Sarah whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Terry pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. I'm here now, he said softly, but we're not out of danger yet. In the war room, Terry and Rhaegor stood before a panel of grim-faced world leaders. Rhaegor stepped forward, his voice resonating with urgency. Your world faces annihilation, he said. Warlord Thraxus leads a fleet capable of reducing your cities to ash. The Norcadian people offer our aid, but even our combined forces are vastly outnumbered. Murmurs of disbelief and fear rippled through the room. Terry seized the moment, outlining his plan to use the stolen shuttle's tech against Thraxus. It's a long shot, he admitted, but it's our best chance. The Chinese premier leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And if we fail, we risk provoking an even more devastating retaliation. Terry met her gaze. With all due respect, Madam Premier, retaliation is coming whether we act or not. This gives us a fighting chance. After hours of debate, the leaders reluctantly agreed. Terry wasted no time assembling his team. In the hangar, he approached a tall, broad-shouldered man preparing a fighter. Ben, Terry called out, I need you on this mission. His brother-in-law turned, surprise etched on his face. You sure about this, Terry? Sarah will kill us both if anything happens. Terry nodded grimly. I need the best. That's you. As Earth's forces mobilized, a fleet of sleek Norcadian frigates materialized at the edge of the solar system. Rhaegar's warriors joined Terry's team aboard the captured Zorlak shuttle. Terry's fingers flew across the shuttle's alien controls, inputting the false orders. He hit the transmit button, his breath catching in his throat. "Signal sent," he announced. "Now we wait." Tense minutes crawled by. Suddenly, the tactical display erupted with activity. Thraxis's vanguard split apart, ships veering off in different directions. "It's working," Ben exclaimed. Terry allowed himself a moment of relief before steeling himself for what came next. "All units, engage as planned. Pick your targets and strike hard." The void of space lit up with weapons fire as Earth and Norcadian ships ambushed the scattered Zorlak vessels. Terry's shuttle darted between massive cruisers, launching precision strikes at vulnerable points. A Zorlak beam sliced through their shields, rocking the shuttle violently. Warning klaxons blared as systems failed. "We're losing power," Rhaegar shouted over the din. Terry gritted his teeth, wrestling with the controls. "Divert all remaining power to weapons and life support. We're not done yet." They limped towards a crippled Zorlak cruiser, its hull breached and venting atmosphere. Terry brought them alongside, matching the cruiser's spin. "Boarding team, you're up," he ordered. "Get that virus coded and uploaded. We don't have much time." As the hacker team worked feverishly inside the Zorlak ship, Terry's sensors picked up a massive energy surge. His blood ran cold as he saw the main Zorlak armada dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Thraxis had arrived. Terry's eyes widened as Thraxis's massive dreadnought dropped out of FTL, dwarfing the other Zorlak vessels. The behemoth ship bristled with weapon emplacements, its hull scarred from countless battles. "All units, hold position," General Hawkins ordered over the comm. "Wait for the virus to take effect." Terry gripped the shuttle's controls, his fingers tightening. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he watched Thraxis's fleet form up around the dreadnought. Suddenly, Rhaegar's voice crackled through the comm. "Virus upload complete. Initiating breach sequence." Terry took a deep breath and nodded to his strike team. "This is it. Remember your training and watch each other's backs." The shuttle's stealth systems engaged as they approached the dreadnought's hull. Terry guided the craft into a yawning maintenance hatch, touching down with a soft thud. As the team disembarked, the ship's internal alarms blared. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. "Virus is wreaking havoc on their systems," Rhaegar reported. "But Thraxis's security forces are mobilizing. You need to reach the main computer core." Terry hefted his plasma rifle. "Copy that. Team, move out." They advanced through the labyrinthine corridors, encountering sporadic resistance. Terry's enhanced reflexes allowed him to drop Zorlak guards before they could raise their weapons. A massive blast door sealed shut ahead of them. Terry tapped his Omni tool, interfacing with the ship's systems. "Rhaegar, I need an alternate route." "Working on it," Rhaegar replied. "Take the maintenance shaft to your left. It'll lead you to the central hub." The team squeezed into the narrow passage, the metal walls pressing in around them. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits. "The computer core is just ahead," Rhaegar said, "but I'm detecting a large security force converging on your position." Terry signaled his team to take cover as the chamber's far doors slid open. Zorlak troops poured in, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. "Suppressing fire!" Terry shouted, unleashing a barrage from his rifle. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as both sides exchanged fire. Terry's team slowly advanced, using the energy conduits as cover. Finally, they reached the computer core, a towering cylinder of light and data. Terry pulled out the virus upload device and jammed it into an access port. "Virus uploading," he reported. "We need to hold this position." The pitched battle raged on as the upload bar crawled across Terry's Omni tool display. Just as it reached 100%, a deafening klaxon echoed through the ship. "Emergency lockdown initiated," a robotic voice announced. Blast doors slammed shut, cutting Terry off from the rest of his team. "Terry," Rhaegar shouted over the comm, "you need to get out of there. Security forces are closing in." Terry sprinted down a side corridor, plasma bolts impacting the wall behind him. He skidded to a halt as he entered the massive engine compartment. The thrumming of the dreadnought's drives filled the air. Taking cover behind a power coupling, Terry assessed his options. He was trapped, cut off from his team, with Zorlak forces closing in. His eyes fell on his Omni-tool, an idea forming. "Rhaegar," he said, activating the device. "I'm going to try something crazy. Can you give me schematics of the drive plasma routing?" "Accessing now," Rhaegar replied. "Terry, what are you planning?" Terry's fingers flew across the holographic interface. "I'm going to overload the engines. It might be our only shot at taking this thing down." He worked feverishly, rerouting plasma conduits and overriding safety protocols. The ship's computer blared warnings as power levels spiked dangerously. Suddenly, a plasma bolt struck the coupling next to Terry's head. He dove for cover as Zorlak troops swarmed into the engine room. "Intruder located," one of them shouted. "Terminate the human." Terry scrambled from cover to cover, narrowly avoiding the barrage of fire. He reached the main plasma feed, his Omni-tool interface flashing red warnings. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, initiating the overload sequence. The engine room erupted in chaos. Alarms blared as power relays ruptured, sending arcs of energy crackling across the chamber. The Zorlak troops fell back, desperately trying to contain the cascading system's failure. Terry sprinted for the launch bay, dodging falling debris and electrical discharges. He leapt into the cockpit of a Zorlak fighter, his hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. The fighter shot out of the launch bay just as a massive explosion rocked the dreadnought. Terry's stolen craft tumbled end over end as the shockwave hit, alarms blaring in the alien language. As he struggled to regain control, Terry watched in awe as Thraxis's flagship was consumed by a series of devastating explosions. The behemoth ship broke apart, debris scattering across space. "All units, concentrate fire on the remaining Zorlak ships," General Hawkins ordered. "They're disorganized. Hit them now." Terry joined the fray, awkwardly piloting the Zorlak fighter. He fell in behind a Norcadian attack wing, adding his fire to theirs as they tore through the enemy formation. The battle raged for hours, but without Thraxis's leadership and the power of his dreadnought, the Zorlak fleet crumbled. Terry watched as ship after ship was reduced to drifting hulks or fiery debris. Finally, the remaining Zorlak vessels turned tail, retreating towards the outer planets. A ragged cheer went up over the comm channels as the immediate threat to Earth faded. Terry guided his battered fighter back towards the defensive perimeter, exhaustion setting in. As he approached, he saw the true cost of their victory. Countless wrecked ships, both human and alien, littered the space around Earth. His comm crackled to life. "Terry, do you copy?" It was Sarah, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm here," he replied, his own voice hoarse. "We did it. We drove them back." "Thank God," Sarah said. "Come on home. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." As Terry approached the hidden hangar, he knew she was right. They'd won the battle, but the war was far from finished. Somewhere out there, Thraxis still lived, and Terry knew the warlord would stop at nothing to exact his revenge. The war room fell silent as the last echoes of Terry's transmission faded into static. General Hawkins stared at the holographic display, his weathered face etched with a mix of triumph and sorrow. The Zorlak fleet had vanished from the tactical readouts, leaving only a sea of debris where Thraxis's forces once stood. Ben Marcus slumped in his chair, his eyes fixed on the comm panel. His fingers trembled as he reached for the controls, desperately seeking any sign of his brother-in-law's survival. "Terry, do you copy?" he called out, his voice cracking. "Terry, please respond." Only the hiss of dead air answered him. Sarah burst into the room, her eyes wild with fear. "What happened? Where's Terry?" Ben turned to her, his face ashen. "Sarah, he—" Before he could finish, Rhaegar's hologram flickered to life above the central table. The Norcadians' usually stoic features were heavy with grief. "The Shrieker detonation has left no survivable space in the target zone," Rhaegar reported. All Zorlak ships have been neutralized. Warlord Thraxus is confirmed eliminated. Sarah's legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Ben rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her as she sobbed uncontrollably. General Hawkins cleared his throat, addressing the shell-shocked room. We've won the war, but at a terrible cost. Terry Gray's sacrifice has saved billions of lives. As the reality of their Pyrrhic victory sank in, the mood in the war room shifted. The initial shock gave way to a somber dedication. Earth had been saved, but the price of freedom burdened immensely on all present. Commander Valkyris, her Norcadian armor scorched and dented, limped into the room. She placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, her voice low and respectful. Your mate died with honor, ensuring the survival of both our peoples. The Norcadian Empire will never forget his bravery. Sarah looked up, her tear-stained face a mask of anguish and pride. He always said he'd do whatever it took to protect us. I just never thought... Her words trailed off as fresh sobs racked her body. Ben held her tighter, his own grief threatening to overwhelm him. General Hawkins stepped forward, his voice firm but compassionate. We'll have time to mourn our losses, but right now, we need to secure our victory. Rhaegar, what's the status of the remaining Zorlak forces? The Norcadian's hologram flickered as he consulted his data. Scattered and in disarray. Without Thraxus's leadership, they pose no immediate threat. However, we must remain vigilant. There may be remnants of his fleet unaccounted for. Hawkins nodded grimly. Agreed. We'll need to establish a joint Earth-Norcadian task force to hunt down any stragglers and secure the outer reaches of our solar system. As the leadership began to discuss their next moves, Sarah slowly rose to her feet. Her eyes, red-rimmed but filled with a newfound steel, locked onto the tactical display. I want to be part of that task force, she declared, her voice steady. Terry gave everything to protect Earth. I won't let his sacrifice be in vain. Ben placed a hand on her arm. Sarah, are you sure? After everything that's happened? She cut him off, her gaze unwavering. I'm sure, Ben. Terry would want us to finish what he started. We owe him that much. General Hawkins studied Sarah for a moment before nodding. Very well, Mrs. Gray. Your expertise will be invaluable in understanding and countering any remaining Zorlak technology. As the room buzzed with renewed purpose, Ben found himself staring at the last known coordinates of the Shrieker detonation. The vastness of space seemed to mock him, hiding any trace of his friend and brother-in-law. Goodbye, Terry, he whispered, barely audible above the activity around him. We'll make you proud. The war room continued its frantic pace, Earth's defenders preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. The Zorlak threat had been neutralized, but the scars of the conflict would take far longer to heal. In the coming days, weeks, and months, humanity would have to come to terms with its new reality, a species thrust onto the galactic stage, forever changed by the courage of those who had given everything in its defense.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.